Hey, muy buenas tardes to everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. Now, as always, do allow me to start off by thanking everybody for you guys' words, prayers, and your amazing support. From the heart, muchísimas gracias. Now, today, I want to restart my story from the beginning. I know I jumped the gun and already said the ending, but I didn't want you guys to get understanding on why I walked away. But I think it's important for my story completely to be on this channel more than anything. I'm not going to speak about my story every video because I do understand not everybody wants to hear it. So, you know, the little movement my message has, I don't want to scare people off. I hope you guys understand. But okay, I'm not going to take it back too far, but I do want to make it clear on how things were, as a kid that made me decide to basically start game banging and believing in something that, you know, as always is something respectful, caring, and it turned into a tornado of negativity and, well, you guys will hear it. Okay, I want to take you back, to when I was 9, which, up to this point, basically me and my younger sister, we raised ourselves, or I had to grow up, and mom's was single moms, and I had to grow up fast, which was make sure my sister went to school, walk her home, feed her, because my mom sometimes worked from 6 to 12. So basically we didn't get to see her. We woke up, did our thing, went to sleep, and but it's part of a single mother trying to get their child ahead. So at this time, I don't know if I have mentioned before, my mother's side of the family, they're from Michoacan, from a small ranch in Cotija. And my mom had a lot of friends and ex cousins, whatever. So she had a cousin that wanted to go up to Santa Rosa. So she eventually helped her get across and go to our house with her kids, which was my homeboy Speedy Luisillo and sisters and my mom. The house we were renting in South Park in Santa Rosa was on Grand Avenue, and it had a big front house, and the driveway went to the back. Had a huge driveway, and it went to the back, and it had like not like a guest house, but it wasn't a guest house. It was just a small house back there with 2 rooms. So my mom brought her, and till she got on her feet, they were staying there. Now at this time, Luisillo, he was a little bit older than me. And yeah, there was already movement in town, which was, a lot of people didn't agree with the Norteño movement because of different perspectives, you know, which a lot had to do with, there's a lot of Pomo Indians that were Norteños in town, right? So the ones that were Raza, they didn't blend in. Up until this point, I just want to say, I grew up in South Park. Everyone I grew up, except for one person, all became norteños, or their older brother were norteños, or the next door neighbor I grew up with is one of the biggest families from South Park. So up until this point, the last thing in my head was, game banging. I understood that at a young age that in order to make something of yourself, you have to get out, out from the better parts of the town, which at this point South Park was. But again, Luisillo, he already had that little cholo mentality, right? And he claimed Sur 13. I don't want to get into the neighborhood he claimed, but it was in Mexico. It wasn't even a United States thing, but he's still, from a small rancho, so you're used to fighting. You're used to scrapping, so it's what he did. And he was living with us for a while already, and again, we're surrounded by norteños, so anywhere he went, he would get him up. You know, he wasn't shy from scrapping with nobody. But I turned 10, and at this time, my focus honestly was on sports. You know, I wasn't too gifted when it came to schoolwork. You know, because I was as a lot of us are. You know, when we're young, hyperactive, so it was a struggling thing for me to concentrate when it came to schoolwork. So I went for sports. You know, I understood. You know, I played soccer, and I used to love to fight too. You know, and I had this old man from Jalisco that was training us in soccer, and he used to see me fight all the time. So he told me like, "Hey, look, I'm gonna train you to box, and I'm gonna put you into box." So I started boxing, taking Olympic wrestling. You know, and again, in my head, it was my ticket out. You know, do something in sports good to make it out the neighborhood. You know, because I seen a lot. They used to get scholarships behind that and were able to shake. But you know, I'm not like a lot of the guys that come on here and they're second, third generation from the neighborhood. You know, again, I didn't see it at home. I didn't have no one before me. Again, my long distance cousin, we see you that was staying with us. He brought it from Mexico, and yes, it was in town. And I heard a lot about Norte and all this in the neighborhood I grew up with. You know, I was most of the day in the park, you know, in South Park, and everybody around the park, including moms, grandmas, you know, had love for me. And of course, I had love and respect for them. And just one night, we understood, you know, that Luisillo, he had to shake, you know, and they were in the process of it. So one day he had a girlfriend. I don't want to put her name out there, but anyway, she calls me and tells me like, "Hey, you know, Sleepy or we see you. He's hella drunk. You know, I'm gonna send him in a taxi, wait for him in the front yard. You know." So I said, okay. So by this time again, we he had a while that he had gotten there, and the taxi came up, and he got off, and as again, my driveway was a long one, right? It was a 946 Grand Avenue. It's there till date, and he was walking up, and you know, from the sidelines, a whole bunch of people. To be exact, I couldn't even tell you how many people were there that night. You know, I believe they didn't take me out that night because again, I grew up with them and their families, right? And they understood that it was not in my wiggling to none of that. But anyways, in my head, they started jumping him. You know, and again, I was taking boxing, Olympic wrestling. I was a kid, man. You know, and I just remember I ran from the porch and I threw my whole body on one that was literally leaning down, and he flipped over. I remember I just jumped on him and I started just hitting him, and next thing you know, I just seen, man, I'm gonna say star, circle, I don't know what, but I remember I tried to get up and my legs buckled underneath me, and I didn't know at the time, right, but they had cracked a bottle in my head, like a 40 bottle. And on my next life, I will show you till this day. Luisillo's death stuck with me, not just because I was a kid when it happened, but it's because I have to look at the scars every day that I look in the mirror, right? And how I got to him, you know, they did their thing. I couldn't hear nothing, you know, again, I was basically gone. I was a 10-year-old kid, right? So when I got to him, I just remember him telling me, he was trying to tell me something. But I kept telling him like, nah, 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 tú le vas a decir, because he was referring to his jefita, right? And but I did not know the length of things. You know, they had stabbed him over 30 times and shot him about the same times. You know, so he wasn't gonna make it, man. He just, I remember he used to speak and blood used to come out his mouth, and again, he was gone, literally in front of me. So, that was my first experience, and it was dramatic, to the point where all it built in me was hate. Sincerely, it was just hate. I picked up hate. That day I lost my childhood, my dreams, everything. Cause from then on it was hate. To be honest, I knew all the alleyways in the neighborhood. I knew where they lived, and I started coming around when we were starting off on West 9th. It wasn't a hood yet. It was more like Unión de Barrios, because PSC was getting started there, and LF was there, VL was there. I remember P13. There was a whole bunch of neighborhoods that were considered to be sureños, but nobody was established. It was just like, 10 from here, 5 there from here, XX's. I hope I'm making sense. So I started doing that, and started going all bad for me, like an everyday thing bad. I had my best friends. They came from a big, long norteño family. For example, Sapo's younger brother, he was my ace deuce. Mikey Toscano, he was, man, I used to love that fool. And Alfredo lived right in the corner next door to me. It was an everyday thing, and it just started going bad, and I kept picking up more hate. I remember the night that I had finally decided to get jumped into my neighborhood, or we started jumping each other into the neighborhood. We went to go pull a jale, and I'll never forget that night, because now that I sit back and reflect, I grew up with this homie's family. His jefita used to have a lot of love for me. And I remember that night that I went over there, his jefita came out and told me, like, hey, call me by my nickname, because my nickname don't come from the neighborhood. My nickname comes from my grandparents. So everybody know me from my nickname. So, and I seen her face like disbelief, someone that went to kindergarten and everything could allow so much anger to a point where friendships are out the window. And it just became an everyday thing that it got to the point where, man, I remember at this time I was already 12. I had already gone to the boys' home in Arizona at 11 for being dumb. I was just a young kid trying to act tough. Now I see it where, I wasn't tough. I remember that first time I went to juvenile hall, I was so drunk that when the detectives pulled me in, they asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And me being a smart aleck, full of hate, I responded, I wanted to be a cop serial killer. So that's exactly why the judge shot me to the Arizona boys camp. And I was out there for a little bit, got out almost at 12, came back to South Park, and, I was getting stomped every day. Every day, because I used to walk from school, and me being a dumb butt, thinking that, just being dumb, I used to walk through their house or the park, and by this time they all knew that, that I was blue ragging, sureño. And, at this, I started being called the traitor from Santa Rosa, because, again, I grew up with all of them. But, from here on out, it was just an everyday thing. It was just always looking for these guys. I didn't even care about nothing. It was just about putting in work, putting in work, putting in work, and just constantly going in and out of juvenile hall. And just to hop, so I don't bore you guys with it, I want to jump till my 16th birthday. No, I'm gonna go to my 15th. When this happened, I had already been in and out of juvenile hall. I remember I got out and, me being a dumb butt, always, we went to a girl's party. And again, I was known by every norteño in town. I wasn't like a lot of my homeboys that came from Mexico and they were new to the game. And, by this time we had already started two different cliques from my neighborhood, which was AB and Burst Street. And, so I was hated, a lot of them from juvenile hall and just boogieing in juvenile hall. And this time I'm speaking of was the one that took me to YA. I got out and I used to think everything was a joke. It just, the stuff that I had bottled up inside me, it was, if I once thought I was smart, it made me dumb. Like that night, I remember we were at this girl's house and a gang of norteños started popping up. At this time, I didn't know that around the corner, one of the biggest families, the Vacas lived around the corner, right? And, they just started popping out. So me being dumb, I ran out and, Luisillo's younger brother at this time was there with us and he was from the neighborhood. So remember we ran up on them and they pulled a gun. And this is the type of dummy I was, instead of taking off, I was put it down and buck up, and, he would stay behind. I would try to rush and it was just stupid. So at the end of the day, I told him, all right, I'll be back. So I told Lucy's younger brother, let's go, fool. So we ended up splitting. We went, I picked up a gun and, I was a poison to my neighborhood. I always speak about how you don't love your neighborhood, well, or your homies. You could say I was one of them, I had a lot of younger homies that day. And that day, there was one specific that always came around, wanting to be from the neighborhood. So my thought was, all right, you have to earn the privilege, right? So I told him, okay, come on, we're going to do this. We went, we stole a car just in case, went and picked up a gun and we went back to the girl's house. And, sure enough, they came and I ran out with the gun. And not to glorify anything of this, you guys know I don't like to talk about none of the stuff I did because it's nothing to be proudful of. Because it led me to a life of sitting down and seeing things and putting up with things that as a person you shouldn't. But anyways, I shot one norteño in the leg and a whole bunch of other norteños because we were deadly, again, where they live. So we ran in this apartment and we kept hearing them. And, next thing I thought it was still the norteños. And when they looked out the window, I was pointing the gun and I seen it was a Huda. And I just remember I went, whoa, when they took the door down and they tackled us. And, we basically had work because that's something my dad was just around for, to teach me how to move work. I was always moving work. That was one of my things. Never got caught for it, but that night, they cut an ounce on me, the gun, and the stolen car. And it's why till this day, all my homies, they would always say, even as a kid, that day I fell and I fell alone. When we went up in there, it was like, there was already somebody telling. It was my own homie's mom was telling on me. My homie, per se. So I took the rap off the gate. It was me and me alone. And I took everybody off the hook. And I went to YA. I went to juvenile hall and got sent to YA. This was in '94. I got out and, it's when I picked it up. Picked up the notch, instead of going and learning from it. Cause, when I have time to reflect, I think about the first time I was in juvenile hall. For all those that say, you know what, I went to juvenile hall and I bucked up and took it on the chest. When you're a kid and, for example, me that went out to the boys camp getting our butt whooped for nothing, man, you're a kid, you're gonna buckle, period. without getting into it, you know. And instead of learning my lesson, I went to YA, got out, and it was always just about my neighborhood. I actually have homies from my neighborhood from my age. I was one of the ones that started the first neighborhood from the first clique from my neighborhood that just belonged to us, which was AB. I'm not gonna tell you I was the one that started it, but I was one of the ones that started it. And we're talking about we ran up in there. It used to belong to Norteños and Crips. So just picture how we had to go through it every day, all day long, to be able to take over. It's right now is one of the strongest holes in town, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm just outlining it so you guys get a hand of why I was so dedicated. You guys gotta understand, up north, we game bang different. And I don't mean it in the sense that game banging is game banging. But up north in these times we had what we call carnalismo. That's why I mention a lot, love your neighborhood. Don't go out backwards. Love your homies that you were out there once. Cause how am I gonna speak against, when we were out there, there was families of my homeboys that didn't have feria, so we went out. Those that knew how to settle, jale, always say, ahí te va pa la renta, hey, tienen pa comer. It was always carnalismo, right? So it's how my loyalty was so strong, and I didn't know how to control it. For example, I should have known how to different it, but I didn't. I carry that inside as what get me blind. But to get into the story on how I went to prison so that I could get into it on the next one, I'll start from prison because I know everybody's like, nobody wants to hear when you were a kid, right? It was when I was 17, 1996, right? I had just gotten out from way, and my thoughts were, I'm gonna be sincere with everybody. I knew I was never gonna make it through sports. I was never gonna work. I wasn't a dumb cat or a youngster. I was one that I like to keep it real. I was never gonna bajar bandera. I was never gonna, weaken out. But I knew I had to do something. So my thing was, if I turn 18, I'm gonna go to the Marines and just, trying to get away to do something. Cause I already knew I was gonna get killed, period. I already been shot by this time 4 times by Norteños, beat down, put in the hospital. I don't know how many times, got ran over. I already knew what my end goal was gonna be. If it wasn't prison, they were gonna take me out, period. Cause it wasn't like they would have to bang on me. They knew exactly who I was. And, anyways, those were my goals, but, I maintained it for 30 days. 30 days, and it just took from my little age dudes, rest in peace, that came over and told me, like, to give them a ride to the neighborhood, and so I did. Once my neighborhood is projects dead end, and when I got to the dead end, I seen a norteño standing there, and I was hot. I was telling my perrito, that I'm over here wasting my life for the neighborhood and this. And he didn't know what's up. So I just told him, look, just go around through the creek and I'm going to jam him up. If he says anything, then I'll jump out. And, so we did it like that. And he represented his set and, I binked him out. Literally, I binked him out. His homeboy got hit once and took off. And, next thing you know, I found out he was my homeboy Negra's son. That's why he was in the neighborhood. It was nothing like I pictured in my head it was. And that night they came back and they stabbed one of my homeboys. So we had started something that I had started something and I wasn't gonna chavalear out. It was just not in me. Again, at this time, I just had my son. He was 4 or 5 months old and I was trying. I was really trying, because I knew well that the end goal. And I always told myself, si caes por vida, hasta que se ponchen, right? Till they pop. So that night I had not drank for a long time, man, and I started drinking because in my heart I knew it was either gonna go time or I was gonna get caught up. And I have so much story on now. We went in every neighborhood looking for norteños and we didn't find them. So we gave up. It was a Friday. We just said, you know what, screw this. Let's go to the boulevard and see if we find some hyenas. As we were going right in front of the junior college, there was three cars on norteños and I told my home, we pull in, pull in, pull in. So when we pull in, they see me reaching for a cuete and they punched out. So I told my home, we follow them, follow them. Now there's two main streets, it's Mendocino Boulevard and College Avenue. And at this time there was two gas stations and a restaurant and the freeway went by it. And one gas station, there was an alleyway behind it that went to the freeway. So when we hit College Avenue, they hit the brakes on my homeboy, swerved and passed them and they started shooting at the car. And everything is court records in town, 1996. I was yelling out the window like, puro, cáiganle. And they were busting. I had forgot that my homeboy driving had a gun too, so when he leaned out and shot, I heard it real close, so I jumped out the car and I started shooting them. I followed them all the way to the alley, and when I stopped on College Avenue and started going back, I thought they had all gotten away in the bushes. I heard something and I leaned in and, there was some norteños there and I want to get into it, for respect of one of their moms that's still in touch with me. But, I unloaded on the guy's head and further down there was another norteño in the bushes and I unloaded the rest of the nine and I took off, and we stopped at a creek, got rid of the gun, everything, and but they already had the roadblock on Santa Rosa Avenue, and basically they took us in. And two of my homies that were in the back, which I won't put their names because they were kids, right? They told on me, so I took the rap for everything because my ace deuce was with us. I didn't want him to fall with us, but he wasn't okay with it. He didn't say nothing, and he did the time. He did about 9 years, and that I went into county, and I was more angry. Started playing with politics. It was my first run-in with, with the big guns, you could say, when I wasn't used to it. We didn't see none of that. Why, it was gladiators. But for this time, I'm going to leave it here. So next time I continue with my story, I could actually start from when I hit San Quentin. I'm sorry I'm so minimizing this. But again, I don't want to disrespect nobody that don't want to hear it. And I want to keep my word with those that want to hear my story. I hope I make sense. And please stay true to yourself and loyal to your loved ones. My love y respetos.